With Microsoft's recent announcement of mandatory multi-factor authentication, I wanted to release a short video about my thoughts. But first, indulge me with a quick metaphor. Back when I was both young and stupid, a few friends and I stole a fire extinguisher. We discharged it, tried to freeze a few items, and then returned it to its original location. I think about this a lot because it was the only fire extinguisher in the home ec kitchen, fully equipped with 6 to 10 ovens being operated by teenagers. Terrible, I know. Fire extinguishers are there for emergency situations. If it's unusable during an emergency, it's completely useless. I'm not here to lecture you about fire safety. I didn't really set myself up well for that one. But I would like to share another stupid story about emergency preparedness, one that I am much more qualified to speak on. My name is Brandon Colley. I'm the service lead for Trimark's MCSA, or the Microsoft Cloud Security Assessment. I'd like to tell you about emergency access accounts in Microsoft Entra. Not unlike a fire extinguisher, emergency access accounts are there for when you need them most. In fact, the whole break glass terminology directly references those panes of glass in front of a fire extinguisher. The one we stole didn't have one, but man, I bet it's fun to shatter one of those things. If your emergency break glass account doesn't work when you need it, you're the one stuck holding a discharged extinguisher staring at a growing pile of flames. Now, it used to be that we would recommend two accounts, one excluded from conditional access policies and another excluded from multi-factor authentication. In our engagements at Trimark, we almost never see these properly configured. There are almost always a handful of conditional access policies that affect these accounts, and those would block authentication under certain conditions. Just in the past few weeks, I've seen policies that would force authentication to be coming from an on-site location. Well, what if there is no on-site to log in from? I've also seen policies that enforce compliant or hybrid joined devices for specific groups or roles. And if you're set up like that, I hope you're monitoring those emergency accounts for group and role changes, because that could also prevent authentication. We also rarely see MFA configured on break glass accounts. And in cases where we do, it's often tied to a phone number of one of the administrators. And I'm hoping that that administrator still works at your company. Another trend we see is that passwords haven't been changed for several years. Yes, but NIST says, and yeah, if you're monitoring this account closely for logon attempts, you're probably fine, especially if alarm bells are ringing anytime there is a successful login. But my biggest concern today is that MFA component. These emergency accounts have already been neglected in several environments. And now that Microsoft is making MFA mandatory, rightfully so, by the way, I very easily see these user identities being overlooked. And yes, I'm very scared that administrators won't find out until it's too late. And that's why I'm pointing out the new recommendation for emergency accounts. Microsoft specifically recommends that two accounts use different types of MFA. One should not be phone-based or a method used by other administrative accounts. A passkey or a FIDO2 key or using certificate-based authentication is highly preferred. I personally finally got around to setting up a passkey for my tenant, and I quickly realized that I first needed to enable the passkey authentication method in the tenant. Once that's done, the security key is displayed as an option when adding a sign-in method to the break glass account. Note that in order to set up a security key, the account already needs a second factor. So I had to set it up using my authenticator app temporarily. Once the key was then set up, I deleted the entry from my authenticator app. The whole process, including learning how my specific key worked and writing up this documentation, took me about 30 minutes. So go out and spend that $20, $50 on a good passkey and set up certificate-based authentication on a second account. And then review your conditional access policies and ensure that at least one of your accounts is excluded from all of them. Not most of them, all of them. What I like to propose is that emergency plan is tested on a routine basis, at least annually. Microsoft says more frequently. Make a plan to test all the controls and protections around the emergency accounts. Break that glass, because those tiny hammers are just so tempting. Retrieve the credentials, grab the hardware key, and log in from an undisclosed location. I find that it's always more fun coming from the Wi-Fi at a local bar or a coffee shop, using a VPN, of course. Ensure that not only the authentication is successful, but make sure that those monitors turn red, the alarms are ringing loud. Finally, now is the perfect time to roll the password to something long and random. Glue the shards of glass back together, wash your hands, and you did well. One last thing that I'd like to mention before I go is that Microsoft is allowing a temporary request to extend the enforcement for your tenant into next year. Use this sparingly and only for large user base. Don't use this as an excuse to delay adding MFA to your break glass account.